Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, I want to have a discussion about the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. I want to discuss whether it is a viable entity today in 2024 going into 2025. I mean, realistically, was it even viable past the start of the year 2000? Was it even viable post 1995, 96? No, difficult to say. But I want to go back in time to the year 1949 when the North Atlantic Treaty Organization was created. Why was it created? Well, at the end of World War II, the Soviet Union under Joseph Stalin, the Communist Soviet Union, the ground forces of the Soviet Union right at the end of World War II numbered just over 9 million personnel. After the Germans were defeated, going into the late 1940s, the Soviet ground forces had reduced its number from about 9 million personnel to about 2.4 million personnel. So at the creation of NATO, the Soviet Union had the capability of deploying up to 2 million troops towards the borders of what would be now West Germany, Austria. That is a significant capability. And not only that, the Soviet military could rapidly expand back to that 10 million strong army that crushed Nazi Germany. So very rapidly, the Soviets could go from 2+ million ground forces to over 10 million ground forces, backed by tens of thousands of main battle tanks. It was hands down the strongest ground force on the planet Earth, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Many believe without the deployment of nuclear weapons, if Joseph Stalin had decided to move west, in all probability, it would have defeated the fledgling North Atlantic Treaty Organization. If you look at the quality of, let's say, for instance, the T-34-85, the Soviet heavy armor that existed then, was in all probability a better tank than the old Sherman medium tank. And they had tens of thousands of these vehicles. Now, fast forward to the collapse of the Soviet Union and going into the war between the Russian Federation and the Ukraine. The Russian armed forces, at the start of the Russian-Ukrainian war, the ground forces of the Russian Federation was just under 400,000 personnel in total. So remember, the creation of NATO was based on the threat of this Soviet juggernaut that existed. It existed. The German military deployed 70% of its combat capacity against Soviet forces during World War II. 70% of its combat capacity. The West, the United States, the United Kingdom, faced maybe during the Normandy landings about 20% of total German combat capacity. So yes, the Soviet Union was a military juggernaut, and its ideology, communism, was perceived as a threat to the West. So one could say there was a legitimate reason for the creation of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. But again, fast forward many decades later, the fall of the Soviet Union, the Russian Federation is not a military threat to the West. It just is not. So what was the purpose to maintain the North Atlantic Treaty Organization? NATO then proceeded to move east. Poland, Czechoslovakia, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, Romania, all became NATO members, creeping onto the borders of what was or is the Russian Federation. And remember, again, the Russian army, the Russian military, from 2000 onwards, in all probability, 1992 onwards, was not a threat to the West. And then furthermore, fast forward to the 2020s, or the 2010s, 2010, 2011, 2015, 2016, the Russian ground forces had shrunk in a massive way. It was not designed at that point to threaten the West whatsoever. There was no capability. And then NATO decided to move into the Ukraine. That was the red line. And here we sit. Yes, in 1949, when the Soviet Union existed, with the capacity to deploy eventually 10 million men and upwards to 50,000 main battle tanks at one point, yes, there is reason behind the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And you have the fall of the Soviet Union and this great shrinking of the Red Army, turning into what eventually becomes the Russian Army, the Russian Armed Forces. The Russian Armed Forces that existed in the 2010s and onward were not designed for a rapid movement into Western Europe. But NATO continued to push east. And here we are. Wanted to have that discussion. Tell me what you think. More to come. As always, thanks for joining us. Have a good day.